Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In the last video, we did how can you make money on bonds? We answered that question. We also answered who invests in bonds. And then prior to that, we did bond ratings. Well, now let's start to kind of wrap up bonds and let's talk about the pros and the cons of bonds. So, because a bond is you loaning money to a company or government, it's less risky than owning a stock where you just hope the price goes up. The company has a certain amount of time to pay you back your money, so you know when you're going to get paid back. This isn't true of a stock, so because of that, bonds are considered less volatile than stocks. Another pro of bonds is that you can expect to receive predictable income. In our example, in one of the previous videos, we knew we were going to get paid every 6 months and we can budget for that. We know we're going to get the same amount every 6 months for example, 5 years. Another pro is that your bond can increase in price if the interest rates in the economy go lower than the interest rate on your bond. Remember that if you have a 5% bond and interest rates go down to 3%, everyone's going to want to pay extra for your bond because it pays more. Some of the cons of bonds are, first of all, inflation risk. If your bond pays 5%, but inflation is growing at a rate of 7%, that means your money is not growing as fast as the price of things like food, school, healthcare, housing, gas, you name it. Your money's not growing as fast as those things. Putting your money in a bond would be better than getting a lower yield in a bank account, but still, long term, you may lag behind inflation. So inflation risk is the risk of prices going up more than what you're earning on your bond. Then we have reinvestment risk. So let's say that you have a bond that pays 6% for 3 years, but at the end of the 3 years, interest rates go down to 2%. Well, now you'd have to get a bond that only pays 2%. And what if after that 2% bond paid you back in a few years, interest rates went down to 1%? Well, you can see how this can be a very bad situation. And again, your money would not be keeping up with inflation. We call this reinvestment risk, the risk of reinvesting at a lower rate. Then we have default risk. Just like you wouldn't loan money to your Uncle Jimmy, who's going through his third divorce and has a gambling problem, you don't want to loan money to companies that are about to go bankrupt. You want to loan your money to large, safe companies that have enough cash to pay you back. If you're not sure if the company or government you're about to loan money to will pay you back, you can always check their credit rating. I made a video about credit ratings, so be sure to check that one out. Keep in mind that just because you or I have a high credit score, that doesn't mean that things can't happen and we can't go bankrupt. The same applies to governments and corporations. A high credit rating doesn't mean they can't go broke, it just means they're not likely to go broke. One good example of a government not being able to pay back its bonds is Argentina. Argentina, up to this point, has defaulted 9 times on its obligations. Governments have the power to print money out of thin air and raise taxes, but even this sometimes is not enough. So the government just simply cannot pay you back what it owes you. So be careful. So default risk, the government or corporation goes bankrupt and can't pay you back. Then we have growth risk. So let's say you invested in bonds for 30 years and your money grew at 3% for 30 years, because that's what the average bonds were paying. But what if inflation averaged about 5% for those 30 years? Well, that means your money did not grow fast enough to keep up with inflation. And because of that, your money in the future cannot buy the many things that you need to survive. So if we state this in another way, prices on average went up 5%, but your investments only went up 3%. Countries like Venezuela and Argentina have had inflation rates that are in the hundreds of percent. There is no investment that can keep up with that type of inflation. So that leads me to the last one here, which is opportunity risk. So because you did not invest in stocks, you did not get the growth that stocks can deliver. Stocks over long periods of time average 10%. And bonds only average about 6%. So investing in a diversified portfolio of stocks would have kept you well ahead of inflation. $1,000 growing at 6% per year for 30 years grows to be about $5,743. While $1,000 invested in stocks, generating 10% for 30 years, will grow to about $17,449. So that's nearly triple the money, just because you had invested in stocks versus bonds. So that's the definition of opportunity risk. You missed the opportunity to make more money by investing in something else. So that's going to do it for this video here, guys. Please hit that like and subscribe. In the next one, we're going to wrap up our bonds lessons. We're going to talk about how risky are bonds. So make sure you go over to that video, and we'll see you in the next one.